Hey, we have finished a unit on the Middle East and Asia, and now we are going to focus more on Europe. Even though we did look at Europe a little bit with exploration, we're going to go backwards and look at chapter 15 and really the Reformation and what is going to be subsequent to it. So if you remember, we were looking at China and the Ming and Qing empires and the Tokugawa shogunate in Japan. And in the Middle East, we had the Ottoman Empire and the Safavid Empire. And in South Asia and India, we had the Mughal Empire. And we're talking 16th century, so the 1500s right now. If you, in your mind, imagine those empires that I just mentioned, and then compare it to a map of Europe here, what are some differences? I think definitely the land size of the kingdoms is much smaller in Europe. And you may think that that is a negative, to not possess as much land. But I think we need to look at it as actually beneficial in terms of competition. When you have these more smaller states in Europe next to each other, they're competing. They're going to compete for overseas resources like we saw in exploration. And they're going to compete for hegemony, which means power in the region of Europe. And there is going to be a lot of conflict, but this competition is going to actually lead to innovation of technology, which is something then we have to compare to what's going on in East Asia and South Asia, and we will at the end of this unit. But where I want to start is Europe and this idea of new monarchies, because we're out of the Middle Ages and feudalism in Europe. And now there are sovereigns, kings, that are starting to consolidate these feudalistic territories into larger territories, like Spain, like France, and like England. And these new monarchs are trying to accumulate as much power as possible. And when they're trying to be absolute monarchs. So these new monarchs, we're going to talk about this shortly, are trying to be absolute monarchs. And what absolute monarchs means is they have absolute control over which other groups? The clergy, the church, business, merchants, and the nobility. The nobility is powerful too. So when we say these new monarchs want to be absolute monarchs, they want to have absolute power and control in their territories. Okay, I don't think a lot of the patterns teachers got to the Renaissance last year, but when we look at the Renaissance, the basic idea is, and I think you remember the Renaissance is this reawakening of art and literature, and an idea of humanism. This is an important word, humanism, which basically means reason. We are going to use reason. We need evidence to say something. That doesn't mean we don't believe in God. We're just going to use reason for a lot of the different ways that we approach daily life. Okay, reason. I need evidence. There's still a belief in religion, and there's still a belief in a Christian God, but now we're going to be more scientific about just general beliefs, especially the nobility and like the upper middle class. So this is really important, this idea of humanism, going back to the Greeks. Remember, going back to Socrates, to Plato, to Aristotle, especially Aristotle, who is really the father of science, Western science. Something else that's really significant about Europe in this time period is printing, the printing press. When the History Channel was the History Channel and actually focused on history and not aliens, and ice truck drivers or whatever they're focusing on, pawn shop, they would do this. What are the top 100 most important events or people of the last millennium, last 1,000 years? Boom. Number one, the printing press. Gutenberg, printing press in Germanic areas, the Holy Roman Empire, okay, 15th century. Why is this so important, the printing press? Because now ideas spread. But we've got to be super, super careful. Europe is not the place where the printing press is invented. It's Korea and China. So please write that down. Korea and China, Song Dynasty, invent woodblock printing. But it's going to be much more commonly applied in Europe because of the alphabet, 26 letters. And when you look at the Korean characters and Chinese characters, we can go into the thousands. So much more difficult and less efficient to print in China as compared to Europe. And so we want to know that printing and Gutenberg is important, but that the Koreans and Chinese are the ones that invent it. I also, before we move on to Martin Luther and the Reformation, the Protestant Reformation, I want to stress this idea of reason in the 16th century, and also a political philosopher named Machiavelli, who wrote a piece of literature called The Prince. And in it, he told leaders that they should do whatever it takes to stay in power, that the ends justify the means, and the means you need to do whatever it takes to stay in power. That's what's most important. Power, staying in power. So if we're just focused on power, we start to go away from morality. So that's pretty novel too. That we're focused less and less on morality, more and more on reason and staying in power. Okay, let me try to fix my pen. Okay, so there's some background. Now, Martin Luther here. Martin Luther in a town called Wittenberg, who is very frustrated that the Catholic Church is raising money for the Renaissance, its art projects, its architecture in Rome, and the practice that the Catholic Church engaged in called the selling of indulgences. An indulgence was a pardon for a sin. You could pray to be forgiven for a sin. You could go on a pilgrimage to Jerusalem to be forgiven for a sin, or there's no dollars then. You could pay. You could pay money to be forgiven for a sin. All of these things are actions. You can do things to be pardoned and gain salvation, which means to go to heaven. Martin Luther here did not think that was correct. And so he writes a document called the 95 Theses, which basically says it's not actions that get you to heaven, it's faith. It's faith. And you need to be responsible for your own faith and do what you think is correct. So this is more individual, a more individual approach to religion. And you can see where that's going to be problematic for the Catholic Church. This coincides with what we just said, printing, and more of the 95 Theses, copies of it, are going to be distributed. And more people are going to read it and believe in it. And it's problematic for the Catholic Church, big time. Because more and more people in the Holy Roman Empire, if we go back here, this is the Holy Roman Empire. Basically, it's a bunch of principalities that the Pope controls, and later sovereigns in Spain, we're going to talk about Charles V, is going to control it. People are starting to believe in Lutheranism, in this idea of faith and not action. And the Holy Roman Empire is going to turn to Lutheranism and Protestant, this idea of protesting. What are they protesting? The Catholic Church, the Protestant Reformation. And this is going to be problematic for not only the Pope, but the ruler of the Holy Roman Empire, who is Charles V. And he's going to come to Germany, and he's basically going to excommunicate Martin Luther and put a bounty on his head. And there's a powerful German prince that protects Martin Luther. More and more peasants are going to turn to Martin Luther for what they believe is the correct interpretation of Christian religion. And so you have this split between Lutherans and Catholics in the Holy Roman Empire. And this is super problematic for Charles V and the Pope. And there's going to be fighting. You have a peasant rebellion. And in 1555, you have the Peace of Augsburg. Peace of Augsburg, where Charles V basically says you can be Lutheran or Protestant. Lots of people choose to be Lutheran, especially princes in the Holy Roman Empire, because they don't have to pay taxes anymore to the Catholic Church. So really in the northern part of the Holy Roman Empire, we have Lutherans. Those closer to Rome are going to still remain Catholic. There are going to be some Lutherans, Protestants not Lutherans, Protestants in France. There are going to be Protestants in England, and much of Scandinavia up here is going to be Protestant. You can see that lots of Europe is breaking away from the Catholic Church during the Protestant Reformation. And it's going to continue. And we're going to have other people that once Martin Luther opens the door to protesting and questioning the Catholic Church, others will. John Calvin in Switzerland is going to put forth this idea of predestination. Remember, Martin Luther said, it's not actions and indulgences that get you to heaven, it's faith. John Calvin is going to go further and say, nothing you do, no actions that you undertake in your lifetime matter in terms of salvation in heaven. We're all predestined to either go to heaven or hell. It's already been decided. It totally takes away any of your agency to go to heaven or hell. So Calvinism will be very popular in Switzerland and some of France. And the Calvinists in France will be called Huguenots. And then we have Henry VIII in England. And he is a Catholic leader, an absolute leader in England, and he is not successfully having male progeny. He's having females, and he's upset at this because he wants a male to succeed him on the throne as king. And so he wants to get divorced from his wife Catherine, who just granted him another female. But Catherine's cousin is the Pope and does not annul the wedding. So Henry says fine, and he basically takes over Parliament, which is the governing body in England at the time, and says through the Act of Supremacy, I'm going to create the Church of England, okay, Episcopal Church, the Church of England, and another Protestant religion. So because the Pope wouldn't let him get annul, basically separated from Catherine, he is going to take matters into his own hand and create his own Protestant church. And then what we're going to see is his progeny, like Mary, his daughter, who's going to take over after Edward, is going to be Catholic. And then we're going to get to Elizabeth, who's going to return to... So there's a lot of different power struggles, religious power struggles, and subsequent leaders to Henry VIII. And the Catholic Church is going to be severely weakened by this Protestant Reformation. They've lost a large percentage of adherents in Europe. So they are going to try to regroup in something called the Council of Trent. And the Council of Trent is going to be held from 1545 to 1563. And they're going to basically say, only the church can interpret Scripture. It's not this individualistic Protestantism, Lutheranism. Both faith and good works can get you to heaven. So they do start to open the door to this Protestant challenge in terms of faith. The Pope is the head of the church, and they try to take corruption out of seminaries and the training of priests. So the Council of Trent is the Catholic counter-Reformation, countering the Protestant Reformation, challenging it. And really important, finally, are the Jesuits. The Jesuit order. This is Francis of Xavier. We've already talked about him in terms of Japan and converting Buddhists to Catholicism in Japan and attempts in China. The Jesuits will be overseas missionaries trying to convert people in the Americas and South Asia, Southeast Asia, East Asia to Catholicism, and they will have mixed results. But they're trying to make up for all of the Catholic losses in Europe. The society of Friends, the Society of Jesus the Jesuits.